my first visit to Mexico City in my capacity as Vice President of the Hebrew University, and I'm extremely proud to be representing this university that I'm sure you all heard about. I'm not going to give you a whole speech about the university, but just to explain that I'm very proud because not only is it the first university in Israel, 90 years of age, a university that preceded the establishment of the State of Israel, the University of Albert Einstein and Sigmund Freud and Martin Buber, a university that produced so many Nobel Prizes and so many other international prizes, but because it is the university that is #1 in Israel, a university that is number 50 in the world out of 25,000 universities, a university that is in the forefront of science and research. When you look at Israel, the vast majority of the Supreme Court justices of Israel come from our faculty of law. When you look at research in Israel, you see that 1/3 of the academic research in Israel is done at our institution. So all the reasons why I'm so proud. I'm also proud, and I'm sure that this wonderful group of people, one doesn't have to explain the centrality of education and the importance of education in our tradition, especially when the mission of our university is really to cure the world and to feed the world and to understand the world. When I say cure the world, the fact that we have 40 teams in our School of Medicine working on possible cures to cancer, when we have teams working on Alzheimer's and Parkinson, this is to cure the world. To feed the world, when you come to Israel and you go to one of our campuses, the one in Rehovot, and you see what we are doing in agriculture, environment, food safety, and water security and water safety, you understand what the meaning is to the rest of the world, especially the developing world. And we are also trying to understand the world. And this is what the Brain Research Center, and this is going to be my last comment on the university before we move to Europe. When you see what the brain research is all about, because the university is such an interdisciplinary university, what we did was to take the best and the brightest in every possible domain that relates to the brain. Everything from medicine, neurology, psychology, chemistry, biology, we put them under one roof in order to try and resolve the mysteries of the brain. And you can imagine that once, not if, but once we manage to understand this most sophisticated of all machines, the meaning of this to the betterment of mankind and to medicine and so on. My friends, I told Jaime before we started that I will have a very brief presentation because I believe more in the free exchange and relating to issues that you have on your minds. I will just say that 5 months ago, I finished a long career in the service of my country as ambassador to France, and I went back home after some uneasy years for all of us with this dramatic rise of anti-Semitism in France. You know, just few facts. In France, there are about 600,000 Jews living there, the second largest Jewish community outside the United States, outside Israel and the United States. 300,000 of them live in the city of Paris, 70,000 live in Marseille, and the others are spread all around the country. The Jewish community in France is first and foremost a group of proud French citizens, so proud of their French heritage. And again, we won't go back into the whole history, but Rashi, the greatest interpreter of Jewish learnings, came from the city of Troyes. And if you the 11th century. And if you travel to France and you go to the city of Troyes, you will see that the city is very proud of this philosopher, thinker, interpreter of the Holy Scriptures. And the Jews feel so much part of France and so much part of what French values are all about. Again, people tend to forget that France was the only country to have had two Jewish prime ministers in the 20th century, Pierre Mendès France and Léon Blum. And if you go to the recent Nobel Prize winners in France, I mean Serge Harouche and Cohen Tanucci and others, they are certainly, and the greatest philosophers and thinkers of France nowadays. Who are they? They are now Henri Levy, Alan Finkielkraut, Marek Halter, I mean all of this. I'm mentioning all of this because what is happening with the increasing number of Jews living in France is a tragedy, first and foremost for France. First and foremost for France for losing their citizens. As an Israeli, I'm of course very happy with every Jew that wants to come live with me in Israel, and I would do everything to absorb him. But I, as a Jew, would have preferred that these Jews come to Israel out of choice and not out of fear, not running away, but because they decided to make Israel their center of living. This last 2 years, the year 2014, we had 7,214 Jews living for Israel. In the year 2015, we had 8,000. So 15,000. Now those are the Jews living to Israel. I don't have the exact figures about those living to England, to Quebec, and to the United States. But you can imagine that there are quite a number of them. And you can see the proportions. I mean, and I said a tragedy for France because, and here I want to quote the Prime Minister of France, who said from the very beginning that La France sans la communauté juive n'est pas la France. France without its Jewish community is no more France, because the Jews are so much part of French society. Now, I have to add that to the credit of the French authorities, they are doing everything possible in order to protect their Jewish citizens. You go today to Paris or to Marseille or to everywhere in France, and you see soldiers protecting these institutions. You see soldiers in front of synagogues, in front of Jewish schools, in front of kindergartens, and there are quite a number of Jewish institutions in France. But the fact remains that what we have seen this last three years is an increase in the number of anti-Semitic incidents. In my last year in Paris, we counted 850 anti-Semitic incidents. Now, what is an anti-Semitic incident? Everything from throwing a Molotov cocktail to a synagogue or desecrating a cemetery to harassing a young kid wearing the yarmulke in the streets. So much so, and you've probably seen this in the newspapers, that certain rabbis, especially in Marseille, rabbis call on their constituents, on their communities, not to wear the kippah when they walk in the streets of Paris. So this is the situation. I think that what we have seen, and again, I mean, I will, for the rest of my life, I will never forget that tragic day when the massacre in Toulouse happened. I mean, when this Mohammed Merah broke into the Jewish school in Toulouse and killed the Sandlers, the father and the two children, and Miriam Monsonego, another Jewish kid in that synagogue. I mean, I will carry this for the rest of my life. And later, what happened at Charlie Hebdo and the Hyper Kasher, and I went to that Hyper Kasher a number of times in order to raise my Jewish brothers and sisters, and what happened recently at the Bataclan in Paris. And you keep asking yourself, why Paris? Why was France chosen by the terrorists? And I think that the answer is because France symbolizes more than any other country in Europe the values that are so important to all of us. It's not for nothing that the égalité, liberté, fraternité are everywhere. It is also the country, the only one in Europe, that did not hesitate to put its forces in the fight against terrorism. I mean, they fought in Libya, they fought in Mali, they fought in Central Africa, they are fighting against Daesh. And when Syria used chemical weapons, remember at the time, I mean, France was willing to go and attack in Syria. At the last moment, the Americans and the British decided not to, and the French were left alone. What you see right now as a result of this attack of Daesh, of the Islamic State, I think that you see, first of all, the recognition that a lot must be done, first of all, inside France. Inside France, in really watching very closely those French, and there were, when I was there, 1,400 of them, French citizens that went to the camps of Daesh and the terrorist organizations to be trained. I mean, at a certain point in time, you have to put some liberté aside in order to have more security. I mean, so it's first this thing. Second is what we see happening in Europe as a whole, and this is looking very seriously at their policies of free movement and free entry. Once you move into one country, you can move freely everywhere in Europe. But the most important thing, and this is something that I heard from one of my Muslim friends in France, and this is that what the challenge posed by the Islamic State is first and foremost to the Muslim world. First and foremost to the Muslim world, and the Muslim world is the one threatened at this point by the extremists of Daesh. I mean, the last thing a moderate Muslim, a moderate Arab country wishes is to be identified with this. And I finish here with the fact that, you know, not too many people, but some of the closest friends I had in Paris were Muslims. I mean, remember, I mentioned Toulouse. A week before the massacre in Toulouse, 3 French soldiers were killed by the same terrorist, Mohamed Merah, 3 paratroopers. And it so happened that all 3 of them were Muslim. Now, the mother of one of these children, I mean, decided to devote her life after the tragedy, the personal tragedy she went through, decided to devote her life to traveling in the Muslim community and saying that this is not true Islam, that we have to work for rapprochement with the Jews. And she even led a group of kids, Muslim kids, to Israel to see what Israel is all about. And the same goes for another one, the Imam of the city of Drancy. Now, those of you who know something about the history of France know that Drancy is a very loaded term for us Jews, because Drancy was the transition camp where 76,000 Jews were sent, French Jews were sent to Auschwitz. At Drancy nowadays, halfway between Paris and the airport, Charles de Gaulle airport, Drancy today is mostly Muslim. But the Imam, the leader, the religious leader of the city, is a man of peace, a man that believes in working together, that opposes terrorism, that opposes all of this thing. So this is where we stand today. I think that, again, I worked very closely with the French authorities when I was there, and of course very closely with the Jewish community, because some people maybe don't like it, but whatever happens to the Jewish community is of concern to me. And I traveled a lot in the Jewish communities and I spoke to the Jewish communities. I think that the recognition and the understanding of the challenge is there, and I only wish my brothers and sisters, all the very best, whether they are there. I wish them to live in peace and security. Those of them who want to come to Israel, we will do everything in order to absorb them. But again, I repeat what I said before, I prefer, and I would have preferred, to have people come out of their free choice. This is a free world. I mean, the most important thing is for every Jew to live in peace and security. If he wants to live in Mexico, fine. If he wants to live in Brazil, fine. If he wants to live in France, fine. The most important thing is for every Jew to live in peace and security. We are entitled to that. And those who decide to come to Israel, I mean, we are committed to doing everything possible in order to absorb them. Look at the miracle we went through in the 90s. In the 90s, 1 million people, 1 million people came to Israel from the former Soviet Union. Remember, the population of Israel in 1990 was what, 4.5 million? To absorb 1 million people? And in retrospect, I think that these new immigrants contributed to Israel so significantly, to the world to the economy, to the culture, music. The joke in Israel at the time was that if you see a Russian immigrant walking the streets of Jerusalem and he's not carrying a violin, that's because he's a pianist.